Hi and welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if it is your first time here. My name is Jess. Today's video is going to be my spring TBR and I am coming into this video feeling quite pleased with myself. I set myself TBRs seasonally because I tend to be something of a mood reader, and even though I give myself 3 months to read the books that I pick, quite often I don't actually manage to complete the TBR, and I haven't quite managed to do it this time, but I think this is the closest that I have ever got, in that I only have one book that I didn't manage to read. So I will very quickly talk about that book and then we'll move on to the books that I am setting myself for spring. So the book that I didn't manage to finish was A Sky Beyond the Storm by Sabaa Tahir. This is the 4th and final book in the Ember Quartet. This is a series that I have talked about a lot on this channel, so I'm not going to go into too much detail. It's YA fantasy inspired a lot by Roman culture. It's very brutal, it's very dark, it's very bloodthirsty and fast paced, and I have thoroughly enjoyed it. The only reason that I didn't get to this final book is because I was planning to read it with my husband James, and the way that our reading patterns just didn't quite align, and so we didn't manage to pick it up. But we do plan to read this together as soon as possible, so you could technically say that this is going on to my spring TBR because I do plan to pick it up as soon as I can. But this was the only book that I didn't manage to pick up from my winter TBR, so yeah, feeling very pleased with myself. And in terms of the books for spring, I have picked 8 books which I would like to read, and then into that we can also add my book club books. The next book in the Robin Hobb realm of the Elderling, which is a reread slash continuation, because I never really finished reading them, that I'm doing, so I'm trying to read one every couple of months, so I can add the next one into that. There is also the books that I have pulled out for my next Smash the TBR episode. If you saw my community post, you'll know that the next theme or challenge for that is the highest and lowest rated books on my TBR, so I've pulled those books out. I'm not going to share them with you because I want it to be a surprise for the video. And then also I have picked a trilogy which I hope that I can read and complete within the next 3 months. So it sounds like quite a lot of books. How successful I'm going to be, I don't know, we will have to see. But right now let's jump in and start talking about the books. First up we have The Confessions of Franny Langton by Sarah Collins. Reading the blurb of this really reminds me of Laura Purcell's books. It has a very definite dark gothic Victorian thriller type vibe. So this is about Franny Langton, a maid who is on trial at the Old Bailey for the alleged murder of her master and mistress, Mr. and Mrs. Benham, and it seems like the evidence is fully stacked against her until Franny starts to tell her side of the story. So it says on the back, "They say I must be put to death for what happened to Madame, and they want me to confess. But how can I confess what I don't believe I've done?" I was a huge fan of Laura Purcell's The Corset, and yeah, this very much puts me in mind of that in terms of the theme and the setting, so very much looking forward to this one. Next up we have A Time for Mercy by John Grisham. I am pretty sure that this has been on a TBR of mine before. I feel like I have very distinct memories of hauling it, but then also talking about it in another video. Clearly I never got around to reading it, which is why it's come onto my TBR for this season. But yeah, I really feel like a John Grisham book would be perfect for spring, so I'm adding it on. This is set in Mississippi. We are back with a lawyer called Jake Brigance, who has featured in a number of John Grisham's other books. This time he is representing a 16-year-old who has shot dead a policeman and basically admitted that he has done it. But as with lots of John Grisham's books, I'm sure that the reasons behind it are not going to be as clear-cut as they might first appear. So yeah, just really fancied adding a John Grisham, a classic John Grisham, onto my TBR, so we have this one. Then we have It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. This is 100% a book that I would not have picked up had it not been everywhere on social media. I don't even think Colleen Hoover would be an author that was on my radar, apart from the fact that just everybody seems to be sharing about her books. So this is what? This is contemporary romance about a young woman called Lily who is about to embark on a new romance, and then an old flame comes back into her life. It says on the back, a bold and deeply personal novel. Colleen Hoover delivers a heart-wrenching story that breaks exciting new ground for her as a writer. It Ends With Us is an unforgettable tale of love that comes at the ultimate price. I feel like the tone of my voice makes it sound like I'm feeling quite dubious about reading this book. I'm not. I'm just very aware that I may not like it, and it's not typically the type of book that I would reach for. As I say, I don't think Colleen Hoover would even be on my radar were it not for the likes of Instagram. So we will see. Then we have Rules of Civility by Amore tells. The reason that this has ended up on my TBR, you will laugh. I recently filmed a video where I was sorting out my unread books, which I will upload soon, and this one somehow managed to be left out right at the end, and I just could not be bothered to move all of the books along and out and in order to fit it in. I obviously do want to read it. A Gentleman in Moscow by the same author is one of my all-time favourite books. It's one of the books that I recommend the most. It's one of the books that I think about the most just randomly, and I'm thinking about books and my favourite books, so I do very much want to read this. But the only reason that it has gone on my TBR for spring is because I accidentally forgot to add it into the R section when I was sorting my books, so I don't actually know that much about it. I know we're following a woman called Katie Content. It's set in New York in the 1930s, and I think it is an exploration of people, why we do the things that we do, why we make the choices that we make, all set against a very glamorous backdrop. As I say, I absolutely adored Amore Towles' writing in A Gentleman in Moscow, so I do have extremely high hopes for this one, and maybe it was a blessing that I forgot to add it into the right section when I was sorting my books out. Another random addition now, we have A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. This is a YA crime thriller. The reason that it's on my TBR is because my daughter Meg wants to read this. I think it's a trilogy, and I wanted to make sure that the content was suitable, but also again, this is a book that I have seen talked about a lot on social media, so I am intrigued to see what I think. It's about a schoolgirl called Pippa who decides to write her final year project about a murder which took place in the small village that Pippa grew up in. So 5 years ago, schoolgirl Andy Bell was murdered by Sal Singh. The police know he did it, everyone in town knows he did it. But having grown up in the same small town that was consumed by the murder, Pippa isn't so sure. And I think in exploring the case for her final year project, she begins to uncover some secrets and some things that people would prefer to be kept hidden. So yeah, this is again another one that I've seen a lot of. Very intrigued to see what I think. Then we have The Salt Path by Raynor Nguyen. I like to try and add at least one non-fiction onto each of my seasonal TBRs, and as this was a book which was recommended to me by someone at work, I thought that I had better get on and read it. It's also one that I hauled quite recently, so you might be familiar with it already. It's basically about a couple who lose everything. They lose their jobs, they lose their home, and so they decide to walk the 630-mile southwest coast path from Somerset to Dorset, and it is literally their account of their experiences. It's their story, it's what they discover about themselves, and it's what they discover about other people along the way. For me, the particular interest is in how other people interact with them. I deal with quite vulnerable people through my day-to-day work, and one of the interesting things that was brought up, the reason why it was recommended to me, is in terms of how other people interact with this couple depending on how the couple present themselves. So for example, or the example that was given to me, is that when the couple, if the couple introduce themselves to somebody and they describe themselves as homeless, which they effectively are, they were treated very differently to when if they said that they had sold everything and gone on a backpacking trip. And in both cases they're still living in a tent, in both cases they don't have a home, but how they are then treated, how people choose to interact with them is very different. I deal with people who are vulnerable, as I said. I deal with people for whom stigma is a very real thing for them and their experiences of that, particularly around poverty. So yeah, very, very interested, and I just think that it sounds like a really interesting book to read. Nonetheless, my kind of interest in it from a work perspective aside, I think it sounds very interesting and I'm very intrigued to pick it up. Another one that I feel like I've talked about quite recently, we have The Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman. This is a book that I got for Christmas, so it probably featured in the last book haul that I did. It's a cosy murder mystery about 4 friends in a retirement village who gather every Thursday to re-examine and look at unsolved murder cases, and then a murder takes place right on the doorstep of the retirement village, and these 4 friends find themselves at the heart of a real live case. That's all I know about it. That's all I kind of want to know about it. I think it sounds really entertaining, really fun. I've seen incredibly positive reviews for this. Obviously there is also a sequel to it, so yeah, very much looking forward to getting to this one. Something hopefully a little bit more light-hearted than some of the other books on this list. We have The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren. The keen-eyed among you will know I have not hauled this book. It is a newer purchase. I do have a book haul coming very, very soon. This is one of the books. So this is a romance. I believe it's an enemies to lovers trope. So we have Olive. It says Olive is always unlucky. Her identical twin sister Amy, on the other hand, is probably the luckiest person in the world. So Olive is Amy's maid of honour. When Amy and her husband and all of the wedding party, bar Olive and the best man, come down with a stomach bug, Olive and the best man, who also happens to be her sworn nemesis, decide to take advantage of the all-expenses paid trip to Hawaii. Whilst they are out there, Olive bumps into her soon-to-be boss, and she tells a white lie which sees her having to pretend to be newlywed with the best man, Ethan, and I think she finds that she likes it a little bit more than she expected to. So as I say, a little bit cliched with the enemies to lovers trope, but hopefully just something really light-hearted and easy and heartwarming to read. And then I'll very quickly mention the trilogy that I plan to read. So the first book is Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Laini Taylor. This is YA fantasy. I read and absolutely adored Strange the Dreamer and Muse of Nightmares by Laini Taylor, and this is a trilogy that I have meant to read for the longest time, so I'm hopefully giving myself no excuses by adding it to this list. So as I say, it's YA fantasy. We are following our main character, Carew, who has 2 lives. In one life, she is a 17-year-old art student in Prague. In her other life, she is an errand girl to a monstrous creature. Carew is basically half of this world and half of a world known as Elsewhere, and she is pretty much a secret to everybody, even herself. She doesn't really know where she belongs. So when she discovers that the doors to Elsewhere are closing, there is some kind of political civil unrest happening within Elsewhere. The door between this world and Elsewhere is closing. Carew has to decide which side basically she wants to sit on, and I think that that is pretty much the premise of this book. As I say, I loved Laini Taylor's writing in the other 2 books that I read by her, so very, very excited to finally, fingers crossed, get to this trilogy. And then I'm not going to talk about them because this video would end up being super, super long, but as I say, I'm also carrying on with my reread of Robin Hobb. This is the last book in this particular trilogy that I have read. It's The Mad Ship. It's book 2 of The Live Ship Traders. My reading of Robin Hobb's The Realm of the Eldling is a little bit scrappy in that I've read some of the trilogies that are set in this world. I've half completed some and then I've not read others. So this is one that I have half completed. This is a reread for me, and then there'll be one more book that will be brand new. So really, really looking forward to that. These are high fantasy. I have talked about Robin Hobb an awful lot on this channel, so I'm not going to go into any detail about this. But yeah, I'm adding this one to the list, and then I will obviously have book club picks for March, April and May. We only currently know what March's is, and that is A Place for Us by Fatima Farheen Mirza. This is a family drama, I believe. We have an Indian Muslim family who are preparing for the wedding of their eldest daughter, and then the estranged youngest son comes back, and I believe it's an examination of the fallout of that. I'm not very far in. I have started it. I'm about 30 pages in, so not very far, but very much looking forward to this one. Our theme for April is banned books, which again I'm really looking forward to because I think there will be some really interesting books there, and I don't know what we'll read in May. We will see. And then, as I mentioned right at the beginning of the video, I do have some books pulled out for my next Smash the TBR video. If you missed the first one where I read books with a bird in the title, I will leave a link to that video in the description bar down below. For the next vlog, which I've already pulled the books out for, I'm very, very excited. I'm reading 2 of the highest rated books and 2 of the lowest rated books on my TBR. So if you want to join in with me, then please do, and then share your video or share your experience with me, and I would love to know more about that. So that is pretty much it for the books that I hope to read in spring. Now that I have sat and talked about them, it feels like an awful lot, but fingers crossed that all will be well. And that is it. So thank you very much for watching. Let me know if you have read any of the books that I plan to pick up. Let me know if you would recommend any sooner rather than later. As always, thank you very much for watching. I hope that you are all keeping safe and well. Take care, and I'll see you soon.